Welcome back, FM Talk 1065 in Mobile Mornings. Dalton Orwig here, and joined by Bryan Comer from the local personal injury law firm Tobias and Comer Law. Time for another edition of Law 251. I guess the 2024 edition of Law 251. Bryan, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dalton.
So I want to talk about something that I think everyone has at least thought about. We've talked about it on the air here before, and that's impaired driving. Mm-hmm. Drugs, drink, whatever. I've always wondered, and there's been times where I'm driving around and I think, what would happen right now if someone hit me in my vehicle and I get out and I know that they're inebriated? Mm-hmm. What's the next step? Because we talk about this happening all the time, and it does happen to people all the time. Mm-hmm. But if I want to, first off, hopefully I'm safe, but what would you recommend to someone who's worked so many of these cases over the years? I'm in the clear. No, nothing wrong on my side. Somebody hits me, I'm sure they're impaired. What do I do?
Yeah, so this is actually a really good question because once you make sure that you're safe, your car's safe, you're not in the lane in danger of getting hit by somebody else who maybe not see you, and you see that the other person is impaired, the best thing to do is get away from them. Okay, because you never know what somebody under the influence of drugs or alcohol can do, will do, and so you want to keep you and your family safe. Okay, and so I would say get back to your car, get in your car, and just wait for the police. And so when they show up, they're really good, whether it be the sheriff's department or the police department, state troopers, of seeing that. And if they see that the other person's intoxicated, then they have their procedures that they have to follow. Do they do a field sobriety test, what have you? And if the officer comes to you first before going to the other driver, tell them that. Say, hey, that person kind of reeks of alcohol or just really isn't acting right. Just can you take a look at it? And then turn it over to them and let them handle it.
Okay. And later on in the process, I'm sure if the law enforcement are doing what they're supposed to do, which they do most of the time or all the time, you're able to get that information later when you're kind of looking into this. What kind of evidence does someone need to make sure they've documented from the scene?
Well, so from the scene, take pictures of the scene. If you note something, you want to document it the best you can. If somebody's being belligerent or something at the scene, again, you don't want to do something that's going to put you or your family in danger. And so the police will do a really good job typically of documenting that. And so what happens is after a report, whatever the agency is, they'll file an accident report. If it's on public property, if it's on a public roadway, they'll file a uniform traffic accident report, crash report, and it will say, does the officer believe that the driver was impaired by drugs or alcohol? And they'll check which one it is, and then was a test administered. Mm-hmm. If we're in the position to where we have to file suit, then what we do is we go get the body cam footage from the police department. We get the dash cam footage. There's all kinds of information that's out there. Did they have a blood draw done at the hospital? And we do those things to make sure, okay, is that person impaired? And if so, to what degree and on what substance?
And so if this person is inebriated and it's proved, there's one lane where it's their criminal future, their criminal trial, but then there's the civil aspect of it. And I was just reading a tweet from someone the other day that said they were happy that so their husband, I guess, had been hit by a vehicle and suffered all kinds of damages, mentally and physically. And this person finally got, the lawsuit money back. And she said, it's been a long, winding road. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I'm glad it's finally over. That process that so many people have gone through, I'm sure can just be hell, for those families, especially if someone's really injured. But what can someone do to make sure they maximize their ability? Because there's people over the years who just didn't follow up or something like that, and I'm sure they didn't get what they felt they were due. Mm-hmm. What different lanes can someone go? Do they need to make sure their insurance is maxed out in certain ways, or?
Yeah, so this kind of ties into a lot of what we've talked about before. There's an interrelationship between the insurance coverages, right? So we can never control who hits us or under what circumstances we get hit. And so the thing that we can do, though, is to maximize our uninsured motorist coverage. And I know we've talked about that a lot, but there's an interplay, particularly with drunk drivers and with uninsured motorist coverage. Most liability policies, that's the thing that the state says you've got to have. So if you cause injury to somebody else, your liability coverage will cover property damage and bodily injury up to the policy limits typically. And so what the uninsured motorist does is it steps in because most policies, liability policies, exclude things for punitive damages or criminal conduct. And so ultimately, if we go try a case where there's a drunk driver involved, we've run into this several times, the insurance company for the drunk driver comes back and says, look, we're sorry, but there's no coverage for this under the policy. So if a jury assesses that those are damages that you're due, then that's where your uninsured motorist coverage steps in and picks up the difference up to those policy limits. And, a question I get from a lot of people on that subject is, well, will that affect my rates if I file a claim on my uninsured motorist coverage? And the answer is no. Obviously, we can never control what an insurance company does, and sometimes folks won't do the right things. But ultimately, the easiest way to explain it is usually coverage and rates are determined by fault, and you can't get a recovery under an uninsured motorist cover policy if you're at fault.
Okay.
And so that's how that kind of interplays. And so, yeah, I mean, the civil aspect can be a difficult thing, but that's what we're here for, is to then shepherd people through that process.
Yeah, until you and Desi showed me the light, I had no idea how important this uninsured motorist coverage is on a number of different levels. Talking with Bryan Comer from Tobias and Comer Law for Law 251. Something else we've mentioned previously that ties into this, I think, the dram shop law. How does that play into when you're looking into a case like this? Because most of the time when someone's driving inebriated, they're coming from somewhere.
Yeah, that's true, and that's a really good point. So what we do as part of our process is to see, okay, where did they get their alcohol from? Was this an underage person who was served? If so, that is a across-the-board violation of the dram shop law. If the person was over the age of 21, were they visibly intoxicated when they purchased the alcohol? If so, that could be a violation of the dram shop law. And what that does is that steps in and says, look, you can't overserve somebody. And if you do, there's ramifications for that, because, again, we don't want people to be overserved and then get behind the wheel. Because ultimately, I mean, I've seen it, I don't know how many times, where a drunk driver or someone who's impaired by drugs causes an awful, awful wreck and injures people badly. But then it always seems that they walk away unscathed.
Yeah.
And there's a host of reasons that happens. But ultimately, it does all play in together. We want to find out where it came from, and then to be able to maximize the recovery that's available under Alabama law.
Well, some really, really good information there for something that I hope doesn't happen to anyone,
right,
but we know it does happen to a lot of folks, and you've met a lot of the people that's happened to, as you have worked to reclaim that for them. This information also up in a really nice form up at tobiascomerlaw.com. Jennifer does a great job getting all of these perfect, really nice resources up on the website. So I encourage people to check it out there. We also have our Law 251 podcast we post up as well, and also where you can find that number for a free consultation 24/7.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At tobiascomerlaw.com, and the number's 251-432-5001.
There it is. Bryan, thanks again for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Dalton.
Yeah, I always enjoy it a lot. That's Bryan Comer, Tobias and Comer Law, and another edition of Law 251. And that does it for Mobile Mornings. Coming up next, the Jeff Poor Show, right here on FM Talk 106.5.